Today will be the last class of this year in Hall of Harmony, this series of Journey of Life and Yoga, because next week there is a program. So we can take a little look back, a quick look back. The animal life, we have seen several types of life that exist on this planet. The animal life is a life which is led by desire and instinct. Instinct is the guide and desire is the mover. The human life, truly what one can call as a human life, at least a good human life, is a life that is led by reason, and ego is the guide. Ego in the true sense, a process of individuality, ego individuality. But the moment one begins to move from here, depart from here into something which is still greater, which is yet to come, and establish fully the psychic life and the spiritual life, and of course in the end a supramental life, will be moved by intuition and something even more than intuition, and the psychic being will become the leader of the sacrifice. So ego will be replaced by the psychic being, the ego individuality by the psychic individuality, and reason will be replaced, overtopped by intuition. This is the grand vision, the scheme of things opened by the Mother and Aurobindo. The first immediate step is to pass on from an ego-bound, desire-driven, mentalized human existence into a greater psychic leading. The process of psychicization is when our nature is oriented to the right and the light. The right is the right impulse, the right feeling, the right thought movement. And this right is not a moral, ethical, social right, not a conventional right. It is the right which leads us Godward. This is the definition in the Vedas, and the Mother has and Aurobindo have made it so simple. What is right? All that leads us Godward is right. It's so beautiful. So many things which, for instance, people used to ask their duty towards parents vis-a-vis duty towards the divine. And the Mother has said very categorically, those who have turned to the divine have no other duty except to serve the divine. So right is that which helps us to grow towards the light. And this also orients the nature towards the light. This change, as we have read, is important because if the psychic change has not taken place and the doors of a higher consciousness are opened, then those experiences can put nature into a turbulent state, and there may be sometimes even serious dangers and difficulties, at least for one lifetime. Eventually in the divine journey, there is no ultimate failure, there is no ultimate setback, but temporary things may take place. That is why Aurobindo insists on the preliminary psychic change. After the psychic change, what we have been reading last couple of sessions is the spiritualization process, which means the doors, the lid of the mind is literally blown off. And the powers and light and the wideness and the ananda and the peace and the beatitude of the higher consciousness becomes a frequent visitor to earth nature. In Savitri there is a very interesting passage where the being of death, its mask is torn away, and Savitri is face to face asking for boon for earth. And this problem is posed before her, that heaven's light have visited earth only partially, sometimes in gleams. That is what is called a spiritual experience. We withdraw into some inner state and have some glimpses, some flashes. Occasionally the heart feels an expanse, a wideness, a state of unconditional love, but soon everything collapses back into the old state of things. So Savitri is asked, how will earth nature abide if it becomes native of heaven? There are very interesting stories in Indian mythology to this effect. One is, of course, the well-known story of Trishanku, who wants to go to heaven in a bodily frame, and he is denied an entry. All the power of tapasya of Vishwamitra cannot reach him into the heaven in an embodied state. Disembodied you can go. There is another very interesting story of Krishna with Satyabhama going to heaven. Because Krishna is with him, she is granted entry. She is a mortal. And she wants the tree of Parijat, which is found in heaven. She wants to carry it to earth. So Indra refuses. He says, no, you cannot. This is only for the gods. You cannot steal it and you cannot take it and plant it on earth. So, well, Satyabhama is Satyabhama and Krishna is Krishna. A fight ensues. And all the gods come and fight with Krishna or against Krishna. And sure enough, the result is very obvious. And Parijat tree is planted on earth. Parijat, as we know, is the tree of aspiration. In the Western myth, there is a very similar story, parallel story about Prometheus stealing fire from Zeus and bringing it down to earth and giving it to human beings, and has to pay the price for it. So there are so many ways this problem of spiritualization has been contemplated. The big difficulty is that earth nature as it is today breaks down under the pressure of the burden of delight, as Aurobindo has put it at one place, burden of the higher consciousness. As it presses, human nature begins to throw up revolt, doubt, all the problems, because it's not accustomed to it. It's something very new. Mount Everest is still not a holiday spot. Soon it may become one with all the new companies, but we go there once in a while with oxygen cylinders. We cannot stay for long because we start missing the mobiles, we start missing all the McDonald's and KFC, and we want to come back. This is the problem. So if that can establish itself here is the problem. The second problem is that the link may be lost. This is another problem which is spoken of in Savitri itself. And these are the problems that right now are being worked upon. Nevertheless, because the boon is secured for earth and man, more and more human beings will wake up to the spiritual consciousness. And it's going to become more and more a frequent visitor. So the thoughts are bound to become more and more spiritually oriented, though the word spiritual may not be used, because it's a new consciousness, it's a higher consciousness. It will become natural to earth over a period of time. And even though people will not use the word spiritual, but it's bound to happen that the coming generation of children will be more and more intuitive. And their hearts will be very naturally wider. They will live in a wider consciousness. We already see it happening today. Today's children always keep complaining about one thing. We want more space for ourselves. Of course, it's not just they don't want physical space, they want psychological space. So it's one indication that not only are they individualized, their consciousness is living in a wider limit, in a wider frame than our limits. Our limit was the gully, the mohalla, at the most maybe our state, and at most vaguely the nation. Now they very naturally, nation itself has become, patriotic sentiment is subordinate to the global sentiment, they are netizens. So many such things will happen, many such partial attempts. Mother speaks of many stages and sub-stages, many abortive stages, many intermediary ranges. We know that man itself passed through several levels. Before the modern man came into existence, we had the Neanderthal man, who was actually a capable man. Then there was a fallback. We had the Cro-Magnon man, then the Java man. And finally, the modern man took lakhs of years before the modern man came into existence. And then, of course, the mind full-blown into the mental age. So, something very similar, because spiritual consciousness is relatively new to earth. It has been there always, and human beings could ascend in rare moments. But they could see from the porch, they were shown the door. And they were told, if you want to really enter through the door, you have to leave the body. So, the great masters chose to tell others that we will take you to the door, but a time will come when I will appoint somebody and I have to pass through the door into my personal lay or nirvana or mukti or whatever we may call it. So one passes beyond and doesn't return. Now, not only those doors are opened, those powers and divinities are flaming forth on earth. So, in this yoga, there is a twofold working. On one side, we have words like opening, opening to the influence, receptivity, plasticity, because it's earth nature has to open. So, the processes of yoga undergo a change, rejection, and of course, faith and surrender, especially which Sri Aurobindo and the mother emphasize so much. In fact, Sri Aurobindo says surrender is the key method of this yoga. And at several places he says why it is so important. This nature has to surrender itself because otherwise it just cannot change. No human power or tapasya can change it. And this surrender must be a surrender of its own free choice. And then again he says in this yoga, faith, which is important in any yoga, but in this yoga the need is much, much more. Because when the new consciousness begins to act upon the Adhar, it's a real adventure. Anything may happen. Sometimes the body may break down, certain other things may come up. And if faith is weak, if one is always wanting to see the good aspects of life and only the divine as a very pleasant looking person, then this yoga becomes really difficult. In fact, why this yoga in the Gita itself, Sri Aurobindo, he describes so beautifully that we have tried to shy away from the terrible side of the Godhead. And he who cannot see both sides of the divine, on one side, divine, the sweet and beneficent Shiva and Krishna, on the other side, the divine as terrible Rudra, the destroyer of this universe. One has to bear both because universe has both sides, creation has both sides. And when this new consciousness acts upon the mind, body, and the heart, the vital, the nerves, the emotions, the sensations, it is a real adventure. And that is why so much stress in this particular yoga on also working upon the Adhar, on quietude, on working upon the very physical stuff, on working upon the heart and emotions, on working even upon the nerves and sensations, because they have to be made ready and fit not only for the great descent, but for receiving and for not breaking down under their pressure. So the mother says there would be several, naturally, many sub-attempts, partial successes, partial realizations, all what she has used a very interesting word, apprentice Superman. So all of us are like apprentice Superman. And she has described it so beautifully in such lovely ways. Just read it out. Who is an apprentice Superman? She has a very interesting passage here. This is from volume 9, Collected Works of the Mother. She says, all those who strive to overcome their ordinary nature, all those who try to realize materially the deeper experience which has brought them into contact with the divine truth. The deeper experience is the psychic touch. Now, that recedes into the background after a while, and we are made to face our nature as it is. And that has to be faced, confronted, offered, allowed to change under the pressure and the progressive increase of the divine influence. So all those who strive to overcome the ordinary nature, all those who, instead of turning to the beyond or the highest, try to realize physically, externally, the change of consciousness they have realized within themselves. So even when the inner being changes, it's not enough. Sri Aurobindo says, my yoga is not complete till the external nature also changes. So it's not just an inner change, having beautiful experiences inside, feeling the ananda, feeling peace, but when it comes to our speech, we become like, dinosaurs and grunt and growl like all the animals in the world. Probably they would feel, embarrassed in front of us. So it's not that. The very external being, even the very gestures and postures must change spontaneously as a result of the inner change. So she's telling us that all those who do this are apprentice Supermen. And there are countless differences in the success of their efforts. Some are very open in one part, some in another. So the work is actually proceeding at a very fast pace. We think it's a slow pace because we are blind. The mother says this work is proceeding at lightning speed. These are her words. So she says we are going to realize it much faster than what most of us imagine. And this may be through various ways, even the most paradoxical of ways. In one of the later, I think it is 1968 or around that time, that she says what we consider as problem will become part of the solution. The problem and solution coexist. And there are very interesting examples of that. One example that spontaneously comes to my mind, of course, in the field of health, we see how problems become part of a solution. So many new things have come up because of the problems. Pressure of disease, human beings are changing lifestyle. And we would not give up sweets, but because we have discovered that things are mixed, so we are giving up sweets. And the latest was about money. Now, we had plastic money so far, but a new concept came up. Why? Because in Kenya, money was, there was a big problem because people could steal at, gunpoint or even a dagger because of the wide disparity, various reasons. Nevertheless, now an ingenious person came up with an ingenious idea which is going to catch up in the world. It's called mobile money. So in mobile money, you neither have a plastic card nor have nothing. You just carry money in the mobile. So when you want to have a transaction with a person in the fruit vendor, you simply say how much. He says 100 rupees. So you pass on SMS this much money to his mobile. So actually there is no transaction. Nobody can steal it because it's locked. And nobody can, knows the password. So it's amazing that the whole thing is changing. Why? Because of paradoxical circumstances. Humanity, in fact, she says, will be taken to the brink. The powers of transformation and the forces of disintegration will pace. And in one of her visions, she says, good will become better and evil will become worst. So they will pace neck to neck, and suddenly the good or the forces of change and transformation will take over and change everything. I'm reminded of a small little Zen story where the master tells people, his disciples, come over to the edge. And they say, but master, it's the edge. So he says again, but come over to the edge. But master, it's the edge. So third time the master says, come over to the edge. And they meekly come there. And he pushes them over the edge. And they fly. So this is the whole thing that's going to happen. Humanity is being pushed to the edge. And Sri Aurobindo has compared this whole process to the change of skin of a serpent. He says in one of his aphorisms, the world is like a writhing serpent, which is sloughing out the dead skin. And it's a very, very painful process. And maybe, if serpent had doctors, they would have labeled all kinds of diseases. But it's a change. So we are going through a change. One is the process of change, which is painful when we don't collaborate. But she has opened to us another door of change, the sunlit path, through faith, through surrender, through aspiration, through rejection, by simply opening ourselves to us. We need not go through that long and difficult process. Change is inevitable, but only the path man can choose. In one of Nalinida's visions, it's very interesting, I think it is 76 or 74, but certainly after he had answered the Canadian question in which somebody asked him that, has the work been postponed? And that was 74, of course, and Nalnida does say that, it has been postponed. But in 76 or 77, he had a beautiful vision, which is recorded for all of us, when he sees mother come back in her transformed body, and she says, I am there, just look at me. Forget the world, forget everything, forget your problems, just look at me. I am there in my transformed, luminous, glorious body, and yet I am just the same. You can approach me just the same way. That means she is in that transformed body, she has come down to us, just accessible to our human heart, our human prayers, our human thoughts. Just the same, nothing has changed except that our material eyes, which are always a limited barrier, they have to grow a little more, and we shall see them and respond to them. So this is the other direction which she has opened. So there are two ways that humanity is going to proceed. One, the direct sunlit path, and the other, through the long winding road, but even that road had been made shorter, and humanity may move through most paradoxical of events, but nevertheless it will converge towards the supramental victory. So here she to express in our movements, each time we try not to be an ordinary man, not to live the ordinary life. Of course, here ordinary is obviously not by anything external, but an inner change. Not to live the ordinary life, to express in our movements, our actions and reactions, the divine truth. When we are governed by that truth, instead of being governed by the general ignorance, we are apprentice supermen. And according to the success of our efforts, well, we are more or less able apprentices. And then she says something very, very interesting. She says, don't try to monitor how far you have gone and how far you have not gone. First of all, because it's a very vast landscape on which the journey is taking place. Nobody has ever traveled this path. Of course, Mother and Aurobindo. But human consciousness has never gone there. It's into a real adventure. When the first human beings came, somewhere born in Europe, what we call today is Europe, there was nothing like that then. Somewhere born in Asia, somewhere born in Java, somewhere born. But they were all going through a different kind of adventure. So we really don't know. And so she tells about that. For it cripples you and you can't run well. So she is telling us, don't try to monitor, because that's one kind of egoism. It will cut us. And the last thing to be done is to ever compare oneself with anyone. Fortunately, spirituality is not a race to be won and a prize to be, there is a very nice little anecdote in Alice in Wonderland. So there is this little race where people run. People means those creatures run. And there is this character called Dodo. So he is the judge. So at the end of it, Dodo is asked, well, who got the prize? So he pauses for a while with a deep pensive thought. At the end of it, he says, well, all of you have run and all of you get the prizes. So Mother says beautifully that all those who share the struggle will share the joy of the victory. It doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter who or what, because, and this is the other part of the problem, it is not an individual isolated experience. It is a change of earth nature. If it changes in one, it changes another. One person winning a victory translates it into others. Another person winning a victory gets into all of us. And that is the beauty of this yoga, that everyone is together on the same supramental boat. And one victory of one person is translated into another person. So this is another difference between Aurobindo's yoga, the spiritualization process, and the spiritual experiences of tradition. In fact, there are myths of the 5 legendary immortals in Indian mythology. I forget the names. I think it's Hanuman and Narada and Ashwathama and Sugriv and, well, whatever. So this is something very different, because an individual can get out of earthly life and clothe oneself into a kind of raiment woven out of a higher consciousness. There's also these stories of, Ramalinga Swami and other saints suddenly disappearing into a Chinmay body. The supramental change is none of those. It is not even prolonging life just by the imposition of a higher plane of consciousness on the lower. There have been yogis who have lived for 200 years, 300 years, but they have taken caution not to come out in the world. They have reasonably isolated themselves and superimposed a higher level on the lower without changing it. In Aurobindo's yoga, it's a change of nature itself. So it's a process of spiritualization and not having spiritual experiences alone, which are only part of the journey. The third thing which Mother says, which is another thing very interesting, Aurobindo has of course said the same thing, that the first thing which will happen is a change of inner consciousness, where it will go to a sufficient point where the inner consciousness is transformed, but the body is still, at least large amount of it is still animal, because it is born the animal way. And that she has termed as the Superman. It is the intermediary link between man, the mental being, and the supramental being, which is a being of the future. Of course, there is a very beautiful essay of Nolnida where he says the Superman is just round the corner. We envisage some of these little children because when we really look at some of the thoughts that are circulating in the world, it looks that they are already in contact with the higher mind, at least, to say the least, so spontaneously. And probably it's quite possible that the inner consciousness is transformed to a sufficient extent, while the outer body is still being animal, there is some residual animality which is left in the body. And then she says, this Superman will himself find the way to directly supramentalize the body. So the difference between Superman and the supramental being is that Superman is a transformed consciousness in a body which is still created in the animal way. Whereas a supramental being is a transformed consciousness which finds the way to transform the body itself by an inner alchemy, and it's a transformed consciousness in a transformed body which has been created in the supramental way. So this is the long-term journey. We will, since this is the last class, we'll end with some lines from Savitri. So, but before that, a word of caution. She says, how far have we gone and how far shall we go? It is better not to think too much about that, for it cripples you and you can't run well. It is better to think only about running and nothing else. How beautiful. In one of his simple letters, he says, who is marked out for success in the spiritual life? He says, one who has the faith that this is the thing to be done and this is the only thing to be done. And then he says, even if his nature be riddled with difficulties, crammed with obstacles, these are Aurobindo's words, crammed with obstacles. Even if the nature is full of difficulties, everything that everybody would say, this person is the most useless human being on earth. Yet, if inside he wants this, I want to do and nothing else, he says he is marked out for success in the spiritual life. He doesn't even say he is marked out for the spiritual life. He says he is marked out for success in the spiritual life. So here she is telling us another same thing in a very practical way. Don't think of what you are, where you stand, how you are, where you are in comparison with somebody else, or how is X advancing and Y advancing, or X falling back or Y falling back. This is not our concern. Our concern is that's the place to give oneself completely, and how much have I given myself, and that's what counts. To give oneself completely is to be free of all the burden and personal responsibility of effort. So she is telling us that is the only way to run well. You look at where you want to go and put all your effort in the movement to go forward. So this is what she is advising us, to give oneself completely, to have the aspiration of the goal, not to allow ourselves to fall back by looking behind, looking around the world. The world is too complex a unit to understand, and she has told us very clearly. In fact, there is an apocalyptic vision of the mother where she says that there are three sections of humanity, one which is perverse, and this will collapse and vanish. She says it's foredoomed to disappear. The word she has used is, it's one of the abortive type of humanity. Imagine, in human beings, there are still some of us who are like abortive fetuses. We are breathing, thinking, but we are still abortive attempt of nature, and this will disappear. She says there is another layer of humanity which is like the animal, and it will be absorbed back into the animal life. And there is a third layer which she says is open to the forces of the new consciousness. And it is this which will be lifted up and integrated with the new creation. And under its influence, the rest of humanity becomes more and more humanized, more and more harmonious, and more beautiful. So this is the grand scheme of things. And we can end with reading some lines from Savitri, where this vision is beautifully described. Towards the end, the passages from Book 11, Canto 1, this 54 edition, so page number won't match with the SABCL. I think in SABCL it would be 766, 67, around that. This of course is 793. This supermind shall be his nature's fount, not the mind, which is right now our nature's fount. This supermind shall be his nature's fount. The eternal's truth shall mold his thoughts and acts. The eternal's truth shall be his light and guide. All then shall change, a magic order come, overtopping this mechanical universe. A mightier race shall inhabit the mortal's world. On nature's luminous tops, on the spirit's ground, the Superman shall reign as king of life, not only on luminous tops in thought, but also on ground, on the physical world, in the very body. This consciousness, this new consciousness, will reign as king of life. Make earth almost the mate and peer of heaven, and lead towards God and truth man's ignorant heart. The Superman consciousness is the one of which Mother spoke when she said on 1st January 1969 that the Superman consciousness has descended and manifested already. So, life's top shall flame with the immortal's thoughts. Light shall invade the darkness of its base. Then, in the process of evolving time, all shall be drawn into a single plan. A divine harmony shall be earth's law. Beauty and joy remold her way to live. Our way to live, we know very well, is through struggles, suffering, ugliness. But there will be a new way to live. Beauty and joy remold her way to live. Even the body shall remember God. Nature shall draw back from mortality, and spirit's fires shall guide the earth's blind force. For a long time, earth will be blind, and yet it will be pushed from behind and led on the upward path. Knowledge shall bring into the aspirant thought a high proximity to truth and God. The supermind shall claim the world for light and thrill with love of God the enamored heart. In another passage in Savitri, Aurobindo says, this heart of man, which so far has known only the love of animal passion and the human love of companionship and camaraderie, will be thrilled by the love of the alone. So here he's telling us, and thrill with love of God, the enamored heart, and place light's crown on nature's lifted head, and found life's reign on her unshaking base. A greater truth than earth shall roof in earth, and shed its sunlight on the roads of mind. A power infallible shall lead the thought. A seeing puissant govern life and act. In earthly hearts kindle the immortal's fire. A soul shall wake in the inconscient's house. Our soul is asleep now. So by the very fact of presence of the supermind, many people wonder what one of the first effect will be. The sleeping deity will wake up just because it's around. Spontaneously it will wake up because it's there, and it's there in the atmosphere, because that's the very nature of the soul. It's like a great tonic has been given to it, and it is going to, its whole process of gestation is going to be shortened. A soul shall wake up in the inconscient's house. The mind shall be God's vision's tabernacle. Last time we read about immortal thoughts displacing earth's sense-bound view. But now, God vision's tabernacle. The mind and its reason, its analysis will be replaced directly by God vision. So one will not only see the divine everywhere, one will see truth everywhere, see the truth of things by a mere glance. One will no more be deceived by appearances. The body, intuition's instrument. Doctors will be gone. I'm waiting for that day desperately, when doctors, policemen, lawyers will be gone from this earth, because body will be intuition's instrument. Right now we have to go to a doctor, he opens his fat book, brings his mental analytical knowledge, says eat this, don't eat this. After 1 year medical knowledge changes. So he tells you what he told earlier, that don't eat this. Next year he says no, that is good. And what I told you earlier, don't eat this. Because that's how rational knowledge proceeds. But when body becomes intuition's instrument, how beautiful. In animal it's instinct. It's unconscious. So animals know what is to be eaten. They are not corrupted by veterinary doctors. But human beings are already a corrupted lot. But when intuition becomes the guide, even to the body it will inform what is needed, what is the right thing to be done at a particular point of time to go through the process. So the body will become intuition's instrument, and life a channel for God's visible power. Not a channel of weakness, maimed, struggling, animal self, trying to grab something and failing and crying and frustrated. It's God's visible power. All earth shall be the Spirit's manifest home.